Hi friends, I wanted to make a last ShakeTube video, uh, and even though I didn't actually get any more of Shakespeare's plays read this past week, even though we only had one to read, it kind of all got away from me. So I did not finish um, Two Gentlemen of Verona, although I did start it. But I did want to talk about Women of Will today and the last couple of sections that I read as a buddy read with Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading and Joe Smith. And in the last two sections, which are considered Act 4 and Act 5 of Tina Packer's Women of Will, um, we kind of have more of the same of good old Tina Packer that we've been having throughout the entire book, that she kind of makes assumptions and generalizations and just kind of feels things. Although I will say that there were a couple of sections that I enjoyed more in these parts than in other parts, particularly in the Coriolanus section of Act 4. She gives a little bit more historical references to things than she had in the past. Although I will say that she still makes some interesting assumptions about things. Like, okay, so we're in the Coriolanus section, we're discussing Volumina, who is Coriolanus's very controlling, um, very nationalistic mother. I don't like Volumina because she would rather have her son fighting in a war and becoming a war hero, as it were, than being home with his family and, um, being a loving husband. She wants to see her son with battle scars, and she wants to see him be on the Council of Rome. She doesn't want him to be a doting husband. Now, the one thing that I thought that Tina Packer said that, again, just to me shows a weirdly sex-obsessed person on the part of Tina Packer, is that she says that a comment that Volumina makes to her daughter-in-law about if Coriolanus was her husband and not her son, she would rather him be brave in battle as opposed to good in bed. And while that is a weird statement for a mother to make about her son, Tina Packer says Volumina declares that if her son were her husband, she'd infinitely prefer him to find honor in battle than to show love in the bed. Quite apart from the unconsciously revealed incest, this also throws up the question, who fathered Coriolanus? She's using his name before this, before he became Coriolanus, Cassius Marcius. Volumina is silent on the question, so is Caius Marcius, who is Coriolanus. And I thought that was weird. I don't think that it is unconsciously revealed incest. Like, that's a pretty bold statement. I don't think she was saying that, yes, I'm sleeping with my son. I just think she's kind of trying to tell her daughter-in-law that it's way better for him to be serving his country than to be home with her safe and sound in her bed. When I read that in this section, I was like, Tina, are we going a little overboard again here with our characterizations and coming up with weird things that people supposedly did that they didn't really do? The one thing I did enjoy about this section, though, is she did make some historical reference for the context of the play. She talked about how this was written, supposedly, in the same year that Shakespeare's mother died, and that there was famine going on in the country, and some parliamentary upheaval at the time. So, you know, that was interesting because you could tie it in with, well, things that were going on in his life and in the country. Even though we don't know a lot about it, we do know dates and we know historical stuff that was going on. So we might not know personal stuff about Shakespeare, except for maybe the dates of his mother's death. We do know historically what was going on in England at the time. So that was interesting because you can see that he would write a political political play during this time, because that was a big deal that was going on in England at that point. And the one thing that I also thought was interesting was in her section on Timon of Athens, a play that notably only has a couple of insignificant female characters. She talks about how this play was basically a failure. It was never performed in Shakespeare's lifetime. And she says that it has no soul. Well, Tina, I thought you didn't really believe in a soul, and I thought you thought it was a verb. So, that was kind of a weird little statement there that kind of contradicted her, I thought. What I think is interesting about Timon of Athens is it is actually one of his later plays, and Shakespeare, the whole premise of Tina Packer's book is that she's trying to prove that throughout his career, Shakespeare developed a better understanding of women and created better women characters. Well, Timon of Athens has like no good female characters, and it's a play without a soul, she says, and the only women in this are basically prostitutes. So, like, how is that in any way proving her point that he's creating better characters? I don't really get that. So, well, those are just a couple of my examples of where this book failed. Yeah, she just doesn't do it for me. And like her thesis falls apart pretty early on, I think. There's just not enough actual research, just more feeling than anything concrete. And I get that we don't know a lot about Shakespeare or his chronology or anything like that. But then if that's how it's going to be, you can't research something that's not there. And if you are saying that you are doing that, then you're just making assumptions, which doesn't make it true. So, all in all, I would say that this book was a flop for me. I enjoyed reading it with Kelly and Joe. I probably got a lot more out of the book by reading it with them than I would have had I just read it by myself. Number one, because I probably wouldn't have finished it if I was just reading it by myself. And two, it was so all over the place, and I didn't feel like, for somebody who was taking her cues from the supposed chronology of Shakespeare's plays, her information and her examples were all over the board. I would have preferred following it in a chronological fashion if that was how she was going to go. I would have liked to see her earlier play, or Shakespeare's earlier plays discussed, and his women character there, and maybe how they were more flat, and then go on to like the middle of his career and talk about how those characters have changed, and then his late plays, and how you can tell that Shakespeare had a better understanding of those plays, and then maybe at the end tie in all of those different plays and talk about that, in kind of a wrap-up style, But it was so all over the place. She talked about so many different things in her life, which, I mean, fine, I get that you're going to use that as kind of like an interesting take on these characters, but that's really not what we're talking about here. And then like it was just all about her, and yeah, it didn't do it for me, Tina. I'm sorry. So yes, so that is my discussion on Women of Will. I can't say that I recommend this book. I think I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads. But I do recommend doing a buddy read with Kelly and Joe because they are awesome. So that's the part that I enjoyed about this book. So I hope everybody had a great ShakeTube if you participated with us. Let me know what you read for the month and if you followed along with the hosts and what they picked, or if you just picked a random Shakespeare play and read it and, you know, had fun learning something new about Shakespeare for the month. So I will talk to you all soon. Bye.